Yeah, let's do that. So we call the meeting to order. It is the holidays, so we'll be respectful of everybody's time. So do you want to do a roll call, Abby? Start out.
I'll just read off who I have as present. I have Slavish, Day, Fortney, Adams, Kwok, and Roden present. Bergenthal, Stewart, Vondrak, and Ramsey absent.
Right, great, thanks. So need a approval of the minutes from our last meeting on November 15th, which I was not at.
This is Darren. I'll move to approve.
Thanks, Darren.
I'll second.
Thanks, Betsy. All right. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you for that. All right, moving on to our agenda items. The first item is the MOU for donation of the Evergreen Road property for trail and eventual workforce housing purposes. Abby?
Yeah, so we have a couple of generous donors who the city has been working with over the course of a couple of years, although we've known them for many more years. They've been involved with many city committees and projects over the years. And they've come forward with a proposal to donate 4.5 acres of land to the city. And the land is right now in the town of Middleton, but the proposal would include annexing the land into the city, and it is contiguous to the city of Middleton currently. And it's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful piece of property. It's wooded, it's close to the city, but it feels, you know, it feels very secluded when you're up in the property. The donors, who are Leaf Hubbard and Pat Trainer, and they're on the call. They have taken some of our city council members as well as our city staff out to tour the property. And what they would like to do is donate it to the city for Conservancy land purposes, as well as a future use of affordable housing, and something that they're very passionate about. Leaf was on our plan commission for many years and was involved with many conversations about the need for affordable and workforce housing, and would be interested in contributing it for that purpose. On the Conservancy side, I do want to note that prior to the city even becoming aware of the opportunity from Leaf, we had identified this site as a property where we might be able to make some trail connections that were needed. So it had worked out really well when he reached out to us and noted that he might be interested in donating his property. So I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to turn it over to Leaf and Pat to say anything that you would like to say to the Workforce Housing Committee.
Abby, I really appreciate that introduction. You did a nice job, and I think I'm really excited about the possibilities here for what could become a very nice opportunity for the city. Actually, could be a demonstration on how we could accomplish workforce housing. So as Abby said, yeah, it's in the town of Middleton, but the city of Middleton has public property immediately to the west. In fact, our property line abuts the city of Middleton, as well as the city also has property immediately to the east. And right across Evergreen Road, there is city property as well. So I was looking at this, and we were looking at this from the perspective of, first, we were thinking about Conservancy Lands, obviously, because of two properties that are east and west that are in the city presently are conservant as well. They're listed as Conservancy Lands. And basically what that boils down to, that property to the east is about 11 acres or almost 12 acres. And then the property to the west in the city of Middleton is, let's see here, is about another, let's see, east, west is another four acres or so. But beyond that little, beyond the 4.5 acres we're talking about here, there's lots of other public land there, especially in the town of Middleton, as well as in the county. In fact, we put all that land together, it turns out to be about 127 acres of public land in that area. And so I almost see this as kind of a bookend to our Pheasant Branch project on the east side of town, where this could start, and well, it already is started, and this would just be from a conservancy perspective, a connection. But I think to me, what's really interesting, I look at the Conservancy on the east side of town, Pheasant Branch, and I see all the condominiums and things that are tucked in right around that public land over there. And I'm looking at that going, wouldn't that be something if we could do something for affordable housing and tuck it in out here, similar to what we have east, but this would be affordable housing instead. And so, as I understand it, Abby, there's going to be a master plan developed. I don't know if it's just for this property or for the properties of the Conservancy land for east and west and this property, but coming up here in 22. And one of the things that I'm really hope that we can accomplish with the workforce housing group is that they have some representation on that master plan process. Because I think you folks somehow have to have some input into this, because that is going to be a major component of this donation, is to encourage or allow, or whatever you want to call it, workforce housing or affordable housing. I know I did some, I'm a landscape architect, so I did a little bit of drawing out there. And I know Daphne's done some too, Abby, as to how this could actually work. Just some schematics, some ideas. And I think I was ending up with, I don't know, 13 or so small lots out there. Now, the one thing that this property, when it came to me, was deed restricted. It was deed restricted to one family home for the next 30 years. So what we're talking about from a workforce housing perspective is a bit of a long range kind of concept. Nevertheless, I think that you guys may not be on this particular committee, and I might not even be out walking the earth, but I still think we need, I still would like to leave something that can help some others. And why, there's lots of reasons why I want to do this, or why we want to do this. But I think, some of the reasons are just our personal experiences. I can tell you that, and I won't bore you with all the details, but some of my experiences, at one time in my career, worked for the DNR down in Milwaukee at a place called Third North. And it was part of a rehabilitation thing. This is 25 years ago. And I can remember leaving work many nights, seeing a teenager standing there holding this small person's hand, small child's hand. And I'm like, wow, that must be her little brother. Well, no, that was her son. And I just always wondered what kind of opportunities those folks would have, just because of the circumstances they found themselves in. And so what I'm, trying to propose here, and that's just one example of many that really drive me towards the workforce housing. Again, serving on the Plan Commission here in Middleton, seeing us challenged by trying to put workforce housing into some of our developments. Amherst Road, that was an excellent project. But what happened, it stayed workforce housing, I think, for the first round, but then people started to sell the properties and it soon escaped the workforce housing realm. I think, Abby, I don't know if that's correct or not, but anyways, the point is, we've tried a lot of things. And I think that's one of the things that, we need to try and accomplish here. I've always heard that, the workforce housing, developers would come in and say, oh no, we can't do this. Land prices are way too much. There's no way we can, make this financially work. So I, was thinking, well, okay, maybe if we don't have a land, and I know it takes more than just land to make this happen, as costs continue to rise. But I thought, well, maybe this could be a part of a puzzle that, I'm going to ask the city to put together as to how we're going to accomplish, how to accomplish this and keep it workforce housing or affordable housing. And that's really all I really wanted to say. I just see that as a central element to this donation is the workforce housing element, even though it's several years away. I think it's probably, if I had to look at the restriction now, we've been working through this for a couple of years, as Abby said, so we're probably 28 years away now. But knowing that it takes some time to work through the city process, public process, I should say. I mean, I spent 30 years working for the state of Wisconsin, so I know all about public service and how things take time to work through the process. So, we might need to really start looking at different models around the country as to, and I know some of you have done that already, as to what the possibilities might be here. But really, it's an opportunity for all of us to kind of dream. We've got some time to dream and look at different models out there and develop the best model that we can for the city of Middleton. As you can see from the air photo here, it is really adjacent to the theater lighting,
High site.
high site. So some pretty major employers here in Middleton, where they may have they may be a partnership with us. I don't know. Just me talking off the top of my head. I also would like to address any questions that the committee may have. I'm trying to address those, or at least find out what the committee's thought is on this concept. I think I'll leave it there.
Right. Thanks, Leif. Good to see you too. So
Hey,
Leif
good to
and
see
I
you.
had the opportunity to serve on the Planning Commission for almost 2 years. So great to see you again. And on behalf of the city, our sincere thanks to both of you too for even considering such a gift. Fantastic news for us. So I guess with that, I mean, I would throw it out to the Workforce Housing Committee to see if any of us have any questions for these wonderful donors here.
Yeah, I do. And first I want to thank you so much. This is very exciting. And I worked for the DNR way back when, and I know exactly what office you're talking about. Yeah. And also, is this near the cemetery?
It is right across the street from it.
Area? Because I wandered around up there last year and it's really amazing. So is this fairly flat, like up on the top?
No,
Or it
it's
also
actually
includes
got
the slope?
Great question. It actually has a slope. There's some slope there. I know there's a map that shows where there's even 20% slope, and then there's other places where it's much less slope than that, but it's all sloped to the north east, basically.
To the northeast. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, Abby's pulling up the topo right now.
Okay. And are those pines?
They are trees that my father and I planted some back in the 60s.
So I thought, I was wondering about the 30 years. I thought maybe you had it for a long time already, but you just came.
This is where I grew up. This
Okay.
is the home. This is part of the home tree farm that I grew
All
up
right.
on.
Okay. And then the deed restriction was something that came from the tree farm, or?
It came at the point when the land was being subdivided into different parcels for different family members.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And have you heard of the land trust, community land trust idea? And is that something you were thinking of?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
We have heard of them, and I know we've investigated with Abby with them. And it's definitely a possibility. I think at this point, they were concerned about the 30-year restriction and didn't want to hold the property for that long before they could be improved.
Okay, all right.
We have met with Olivia Williams, the director, and she's taken some information back to our board, and we're continuing to meet with her just to explore any opportunities we have in Middleton. And so she's aware that we're proceeding on this. I think she'd be very interested. The 30 years is kind of the difficult part for them, because they would have to hold on to it and incur cost over that time for maintenance. But I think it's still a possibility that we should keep open. And along the same lines of keeping the possibilities open, Rob Bergenthal wasn't able to make it today, but he did suggest, and I had a conversation with Leaf about this as well, and Leaf was supportive. He suggested that we modify one of the bullet points that's in the MOU that specifically says that this would be land for owner occupied housing. And he said that maybe we should just modify that and just say workforce housing and leave it open as we can for any opportunity that might arise, in the future that we don't even anticipate. So, and then there's another change too, where I had a typo in the MOU. I had said that there was a driveway that was serving the lands to the west, and it should have said the south. So I've made that change as well. And our city attorney is working on the MOU right now for the property donation, but all I've included in the packet for you all is just the bullet points that we kind of roughed up and then gave to him for his to put into like the legal format.
Yeah, so the concepts are there, but it may, well, as you folks all know, it may read a little different once he's done with it.
Other questions from the committee?
This is Darren, and I would echo Betsy's comment. This is really, really exciting from my perspective. What is the neighboring city zoning in and around that general area? I'm not as familiar with that part of the city. What is the current zoning? Not that it couldn't be changed, of course, but.
Well, it's currently in the town, and so it has zoning just for one single family home. But when you compare it to the nearest development that's in the city, the nearest residential development is Hidden Oaks. And this is all zoned planned development district. And really the reason that it was zoned PDD is to enable smaller lots than what the traditional zoning code would allow. So as an example, this lot, I pulled up Kurt Fusard's lot. His lot is 4,200 square feet, 0.1 acres. So you can see, like, if we were able to develop the Hubbard property in the same way that we would develop it if we're in the city, which is, really compact development, it could potentially be, several small lots, but the restriction is really the biggest hurdle to overcome. And then there's another hurdle, which is that it's not currently served by city utilities. And it's not in the master plan right now for city utilities. So that would also be a future decision point.
Yeah, and to that point, Abby, you're absolutely right. But the city utilities aren't that far away. They're just across Evergreen Road for, service the apartments or Whispering Pines there. And then, of course, they're there at Hidden Oaks as well. So it comes from both the east and the west. Could.
And what you said about the Conservancy, the homes right up next to there on the west side of the Conservancy, I was thinking the same exact thing the other day when I was walking by. It's just like, why can't these be available to everybody,
Mhm.
So yeah, I love the concept. I wish the time frame were shorter just because it's so exciting, but
We all do.
yeah.
And this has
is there
been, I agree, this
Yeah,
is
go ahead.
very exciting, but just because I have no familiarity with this, I just ask that the 30-year restriction, there is no avenues to adjust that?
It's basically a restriction. There are two other property owners, because it serves these two property owners to the south. That's the reason it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'd have to get them to agree to remove it. And I don't see at this time that there's any interest whatsoever on those two property owners removing that restriction. They're in fact the ones that placed it on the property before it became mine.
Gotcha.
So Leaf, I had a question. So the driveway, I guess that serves that house to the south. Is there an actual easement that runs through the property, or is that?
There is
Okay.
an actual formal legal easement that runs through the property for that driveway.
Okay.
So when I was laying out lots there, I was working basically on the north side of that driveway all the way to the west property line, and using lot sizes very similar to what is at Hidden Oaks.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
don't know exactly what Daphne did, Abby, but she also has a concept out there.
Yeah, Daphne is our associate planner, for those who don't know her, and she was basically using like the average smaller lot size that we're seeing in almost every new subdivision that's getting developed in Middleton, starting with Middleton Hills. Almost all of them have had those smaller 3,000 to 4,000 square foot single family lots.
Okay. And then Leaf, I had, I guess, another question to add to kind of Rob's comment about, your willingness, the two of you, and your willingness to potentially consider something other than owner occupied. I mean, given that we're, more or less 28 years away before we're making a decision on this, whether or not you two would be receptive to other options here, potentially multifamily, if that made sense down the road.
I am. I think Dan Ramsey might have some other thoughts on that. So that's the present committee makeup. But I just would like to see this opportunity really come to fruition. Even though it's a ways off, I still think it actually provide something for some folks that probably would not have the opportunity. And I think that would be one of the higher and best use of the property, is to allow some folks an opportunity to maybe have a little different living environment.
Yeah, and for those of us who work in affordable housing, myself and Lori, and I believe Abby on the call too from MDC, we work in affordable rental housing. And I think we would probably all three tell you that one of the things that we'd love to see more is actual home ownership. you know, a lot of people that rent, I mean, that's a landing spot for many, but ultimately, you know, finding ways for folks to find housing they can actually purchase would certainly be our objective, but it's difficult to do. And I would think, you know, given that we're looking at such a long time horizon, that we would just, you know, try to build in some flexibility there with maybe a preference for, you know, home ownership.
Mhm. Yep. No, that's exactly it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other Workforce Housing Committee members, comments, questions?
I have a question about the annexation, I guess. So it's in the town now,
Mhm.
but because you're gifting it to the city, is that like automatically
No, I
to
know.
a city property?
Yeah, Abby, why don't you go ahead and grab that?
Yeah, the real reason that we need to annex it is because we're looking at potentially making improvements on it in the near term, like a trail connection, and we already have
Vegetation.
habitat.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Vegetation survey that's underway now, and so since we're spending city resources, we need to make sure that it's in the city. So that's kind of our intent, and our city forester, Mark Wagner, has been pretty involved with this project as well. And the Conservancy Lands Commission did approve the bullet points that we put together, and they recommended we proceed, but it sounded like their preference was that it be brought into the city. We talked a little bit about the Madison Area Community Land Trust, and one development that they have that is very successful is the Troy Gardens project in Madison, and that does combine conservation land with affordable housing. And so, you know, even though it's a ways still into the future, that's kind of what we're thinking might really work well together, where, you know, we're providing the trail that would, you know, cut across the property, connecting the public land on either side, but then we would cluster the housing around the amenities, and it would be publicly owned land, but there may be some small lots within the parcel that are eventually dedicated to a community land trust, so that owner occupied housing could be built on it.
Yeah, and I think, I know, Abby, I think I sent you an article, I can't even remember, it was on the West Coast, where it was really interesting how they were able to keep the land and the project affordable from one homeowner to the next. And so there are some models out there. I don't know the details of that particular model, but that was one of their goals, was to keep it so it would be affordable to future owners as well.
All right, anything else from the committee? Other questions or comments? All right, so Abby, we're looking for just kind of the Workforce Housing Committee's position on this, which I believe sounds generally favorable. And I guess I heard that, you know, just some consideration, again, given the long time horizon here, that some consideration for options here, a preference potentially for owner occupied, but, you know, consideration also given for potentially rental housing as well, depending on what market conditions look like, you know, at that time. So does anybody want to make a motion in that regard?
Let's see. So you're looking for a motion that would support the MOU and recommend it to the council or the planning commission for consideration?
Well, I believe, Abby, what planning commission, and then also council as well. I mean, the MOU needs to be drafted further, does it not?
She frozen?
I think she's frozen.
Something happened to Abby. I think, Mike, I think you're right. The MOU definitely is just in a very draft
Sure.
format right now. And will be continued to be worked on, but the main concepts are there.
Yeah.
In fact, if
we
there
know there's
were,
work to do there later.
if there were things that the Workforce Housing Committee wanted to add to the draft, I would be more than open to that from the perspective of the conservation part, because of my background and the things that where I've worked. I'm pretty comfortable with that whole conservation part, but the workforce housing or the affordable housing part of it, I thought was at this point maybe just a little light, but I really didn't have the best background to really make that stronger. I think it can be made stronger, and I'd certainly welcome any input that the committee would have on that front to make the workforce housing element of this MOU stronger.
So Abby, we see that you're back.
I was so nervous that the whole meeting shut down. I don't know what happened. I lost internet. That never happens at my house. So sorry about that.
I don't know if you heard, Abby, but Leif was talking about that it maybe should be the language concerning the workforce housing part of the MOU could maybe be made at least as strong as the language and extensive as the language about the Conservancy, so that maybe it be worded such that there's a dual purpose here, and then outline each of those purposes in similar detail.
Okay.
And Abby, we don't know if you're, and we talked about certainly a preference for owner occupied housing. But again, given the long time horizon on this before it actually plays out, that, also be willing to consider some kind of multifamily housing here potentially as well.
Yeah, I like that, given that flexibility, but I also like putting, a little bit of guidance as to what we're thinking right now, and what Leif has been saying about preference towards, owner occupied or whatnot. I think that's important too, because somebody looking at this and, well into the future may not know what that intent is. So, and we know what the intent is, we just don't know what the market conditions are going to be like. So.
That makes sense.
Yep. So Betsy, was that your formal motion?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what the motion should be, because I am looking, and it does talk about workforce housing in a little bit more detail, but obviously it's a draft. It pretty much just lists a bunch of pieces. So will the MOU be rewritten? It's going to be written by the attorney, city attorney?
Yep.
Okay.
So does that come back to us, Abby, or?
I can, if you want it to come back.
I don't know if it needs to come back to us, as long as, the intent of what we're proposing here is conveyed, and I would believe reflected in that. I mean, if everybody's in agreement on that.
Yeah, because the first large paragraph says intent is to provide opportunities for education and interpretation. So if there could be upfront a written intent rather than an afterthought that workforce housing is a component,
okay.
The intent be a dual intent, and that be stated up front. So that, I guess, would be, I don't know how I make a motion out of that, but I guess I would move to approve the finalizing of the MOU with the dual intent of workforce housing and conservation.
Right.
Sounds
Thanks.
great. I will second that.
Okay. We have a second from Darren. Thank you, Darren. Any further discussion on the part of the committee? If not, get approval. Everybody signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Thanks all.
Great.
And thanks you two. Really appreciate on behalf of the Workforce Housing Committee as well as the City of Middleton. Great
Thank
news
you.
for us.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, moving on. Item number 2 on the agenda. Presentation of the proposal for community development block grant funding, the disaster recovery funding by Madison Development Corp. For their project that they're proposing on Century Avenue. Lori, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So we're probably going to try to share a screen here. We'll see if that's going to work. Give me 1 second. Oh, I cannot. Oh, somebody did that. Thank you.
Yeah, that was me. Would you rather share?
No,
it
no, no, you
directly?
go for it. That's fantastic.
Okay.
Well,
let me-
thank you so much, Abby. So first I'd like to introduce my team members that are with me here today. Abby Walhouse, who is our VP of Finance and our CFO, and myself, and then also Cashin Laufenberg is calling in, and he is our Director of Property Management, who has been with MDC for over 7 years and manages our properties. So if we go to the second slide, a little bit about MDC that you may know or may not. Our mission is to help create jobs by making loans hard to finance small businesses and to provide and create affordable workforce housing for Madison and Dane County residents. So we currently own 348 workforce housing units in Dane County. 76 of them are in Middleton on Allen Boulevard. And we also run the Dane Workforce Housing Fund, which was just launched last year. And we funded the 39 unit project that Wisconsin Housing Preservation Corp did on University Avenue. And we actually have 2 additional projects that we're looking to fund in Middleton in the next quarter, first quarter of 2022. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the things when the RFP came out, the second round 2, I thought what we'd do is just kind of look at what your criteria was and where we stack up. So first of all, the total number of units in our project is 50, and the RFP requires, a minimum of 30 units being considered affordable. And so we actually have a total of 50. Units rented to households under 80%. This CDBG DR grant award is not actually, it's a different RFP because it's basically they're just looking for units under 80% with a preference towards some under 60%. So we have up to 40 units rented to households under 80%. And of course, there's only 30 required in that regard. And then the units rented to households under 60%, which is also a preference area. It said up to 20 units under 60%. And so we plan on having probably about 10 of those under 50% and 10 under 60% of the area median income. And then the affordability period, 30 years, 20 years is the minimum based on the RFP. And we plan to make this permanent affordable housing. We have no problem putting a 30-year land use restriction agreement on it. And then the total project estimate was a minimum investment of $11 million by the developer. Our actual total project cost, unfortunately, it's kind of pricey, but it's $12.3 million. It does include the 15% increased cost due to Davis-Bacon wages applying to the construction wages, just so you know. So whether or not we are over and under, I put that as the last line, and we basically meet the criteria in every single regard. And I added another one as a bonus information, which I thought was relatively important based on our last attempt. We do have site control. We do have a signed purchase agreement. It's with Cresta LLC, which is interestingly owned by Jacob Klein. And it is for purchase of a lot on or before February 15th, 2022. And the location of those will go over on the next slide. I believe it's the next slide. Okay, so these are the 2 lots. It's 6904 and 6908 on Century Avenue. It is next to Pick and Save. And it's also according to the workforce housing and the comprehensive plan, it is in a transit-oriented development area along a major road, which is Century Avenue. Next slide. So this is the first rendering that we have, and certainly, we are open to changes. We did meet with some of the neighbors and the alder regarding this. It's a prairie style building to kind of match the neighborhood of Middleton Hills. And we are including, green space around the building, a community room, balconies on each and every unit, as well as underground parking and an exercise room. And some, input from the neighbors gave us a few more tweaks as to access to the Middleton Hills Park in the back and also to the Pick and Save. Next slide. Okay, so where are rents going to range? So we consider this affordable workforce housing. And so our target is really households whose incomes range from 40 to 80% of the area median income. So if you look at the different HUD charts, there's a couple different things. One of them is the area median income by HUD, and the other one's the county median income. But we'll just talk about the HUD maxes on WIDA. So basically it's around 56,000 for one person to around 80,000 for a family of 4. So at a studio or an efficiency bedroom, those rents, depending again on your income level and how many people in your household, would range from $790 to $870. On a 1 bedroom, they'd range from $860 to $1,100. And on a 2 bedroom, from $1,500 to $1,650 per month. And what we put over on the right is for those of you who aren't familiar, the HUD maximum rents there's so many different variables of this. I'll just make full disclosure there, but this is the one based on the 80% for the WIDA most recent HUD charts. And I did put a link at the bottom to those particular charts. Next slide, please. So source and uses of funds. This has been interesting because there was a large gap in financing, and thanks to the opportunity to get the CDBG funds, and I apologize, I put a total of $3 million. I should have put $2,950,000 on this. We do have a couple of banks that have given us term sheets on mortgages from up to $7.5 to $8 million. We do have the capacity and ability to put in our own equity, and I put in this particular capital stack $853,000. This is not a tax credit project. We don't get big developer fees, but we will apply to the Dane County Affordable Housing Fund in the spring for $500,000 to $1 million, and we'll see what we get out of that. And then the uses of funds are simply the acquisition of the property is very expensive, which is why I really just embraced the generous donation of land. That's so huge. We see the construction and commercial costs being around $10.5 million. And so for soft costs around $211,000. Davis-Bacon is included with a total of $12,353,000. So if you want to go to the next page, and I welcome questions at any time. These spreadsheets can get really unwieldy, and I tried to make it as big as possible, but basically what we need to meet in order to make an affordable housing, workforce housing project successful is we need to meet a certain debt service coverage ratio to ensure that we can pay back our sources of funding. So in the case of a CDBG grant, hopefully there are no interest or payments that we are having to calculate in. We just did a CDBG home fund grants on a 44 unit 2 years ago, and there's no interest or payments due. It does go on as a liability of Madison Development Corporations, but it only becomes due and payable if we change the purpose of the property, in other words, make it market rate, or we sell it to a market rate developer and try to take the affordability off. So we don't intend to do that. We intend to hold it permanently. We are more than happy to put a land use restriction to keep it affordable. So this kind of just shows you the total revenue we estimate being about $695,000. Our net operating income after all of, paying all the fees and expenses, including we put a pilot payment in here. Net operating income of $487,000 divided by our debt service. And this is that $8 million loan that you saw earlier. And we would get cash flow of about $62,000, which gives us the debt service coverage ratio of 1.15 with putting reserves aside, and without reserves 1.19. The banks are going to look for about 1.2, so we're pretty close to being there. And I just will make another disclaimer on MDC. We are not creating a separate LLC or an entity or going for tax credits. This is Madison Development Corporation using our resources to buy the lots to build this development, and we will own and manage it ourselves. We have a facilities team of 4 and a property management team of 4 that are part of our organization. And we've been in this business since 1977. So if you want to go to the next slide. Project timeline. This is I have a couple questions on these that I was going with Abby Atun on today, but basically we've already submitted our concept review. We've applied for the CDBG grant and got that in on time. In December, obviously, your committee is meeting. We hope that the council meets tomorrow, and then we'll continue to do design development with Kenothi and Bruce, based on the input that we're receiving from some of the neighbors right now. And then Falder West calls a meeting in early January. Then we'll do our submittal. February, we hope to go to Plan Commission. March, hopefully we'll get approval. And then June, we'll start to submit plans for reviewing and permitting. And then, as most CDBG grants requires, that we have to do a competitive bid for an RFP for a general contractor. And hopefully we would be breaking ground in fall of 2022 and with completion in fall of 2023. And I believe the last slide is next. Oh, this just shows you what we recently built. This is really a cool building. It's called the Grass Camp. You'll see our patio in there, exercise room, all granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, LVP flooring, got a fireplace and a nice community room for people, plus patios. And then the last slide, I think, is next. That's it. So we partner with local people. We don't provide social services ourselves because we tend to have workforce housing and there is not a high need. However, we certainly have partnered with Middleton Outreach Ministry, for example, who's been fantastic about helping people with rent during the pandemic. And we have lots of other partners that we work with to make sure that our tenants can pay their rent and that they have a quality place to live. So with that's the end of my comments. I certainly welcome questions.
Thanks, Lori. Great presentation. I've had a chance to see this project already, being on the Planning Commission. So certainly opening this up to any of our committee members. Any questions for Lori or Abby or her team?
This is Darren. I have a couple of questions, and I realize we are not the Planning Commission, so I'll try. What can you just describe the outreach that you had with neighboring parcels? Which properties have you had outreach with?
So Susan West introduced us to Don Knorr, and they kind of have a committee that gets together once a month. So on December 1st, we met with Don Knorr's committee, but also several people from the Guard condos came there. And so they gave us really good insights and inputs on, making sure, the landscaping around the area and getting access to that Middleton Hills Park. We've also been in conversations with the Erdmans, Natalie and Dan. And just for full disclosure, the fund that I mentioned before that I run, the Dane Workforce Housing Fund, Natalie is chair of my advisory committee to review those deals. And they were very supportive of multifamily housing. They've seen the renderings. I haven't given them an update in the last week, but they seem very willing to work with us and even possibly provide additional parking spots to our tenants if needed. I don't think we need them based on, where we're at, but if needed.
So the Guard Park condominiums are immediately behind the 2 sites the MDC is looking at here.
Mm-hmm. And then there's like a kitty corner to that park behind it with a pool, a pond, a retention pond. And just so we know, we've already had the engineering done on this as well. And we have a plan to, they're evidently, according to the neighbors who were just fantastic to talk to, they said that they would work with us on that, the people who are on the landscaping committees, talked about some ideas. And so they said that the back of the lot was fairly wet. So our goal is to direct that underneath, the building towards the street in the city's water system, drainage system. So they've given us some good ideas, but we certainly look forward to more ideas and before we complete the final design.
My second question was kind of relating to the rear of the property. Certainly there's a huge amenity with the boardwalk in the probably one of the most used parks in Middleton Hills is the one right on the rear of the property. Is there any way to get residents to access that, or how would they actually? I'm not familiar with the parcel lines back there, but certainly there's going to be a huge draw to that park and that boardwalk, and I use that almost daily. And that park is just incredible, and it'd be great well, I'm assuming that people are gonna want to access that. So how would they get there? Or are they gonna have to go all the way around?
Yes, actually, that's just a great point, Darren. Thank you for asking that. That's what the condo owner suggested. So if we go back and we can zoom on that little back corner right here, I don't know if you can see my arrow. So the suggestion by the neighbors, this particular road right here is it's the condo owner's road. So that is not a public road. So the thought was to try to get some walkway from the back of this lot. And they said they'd be willing to do that if we made a walkway from the back of this building, the building that we would build, over into the park, that would direct people that way. And then they also asked that we put a landscaping line of trees along here to discourage them from walking onto their road, which makes sense. And then the last thing that they asked, which I haven't talked to the Erdmans yet, but that was to make sure that there was some access directly into the Pick and Save parking lot so that people could walk over to the Pick and Save. And then one last comment that came up was, so right now there's 2 driveways there. If we obviously built there, there'd be 1 driveway. They would actually like to see it get to 0 driveways and just have a main access here through this main road and then cut across the Erdman parking lot. I'm not sure if Erdman's would be up for that, but either way, it would go from 2 driveways down to 1 driveway. So did that answer your question on the park?
Yeah, it did. And that, because they're going to want to go there. So making it formalized.
I know there's so much beautiful property in Middleton. It's amazing. It's walkable to the Pheasant. Literally you just go by Pick and Save and you head back and you can get to the Pheasant Preserve, no problem.
Right. I have just another question. With 50 units, is there any concern about people being able to make a left turn out on Century? Is increasingly, it's a 4-lane undivided road, which is terrible for, traffic operations. There's nowhere to get left turning vehicles. So trying to get a car to turn left out of there is going to start to become problematic. Is there any thought on how that might happen?
There has not been thought on that, but I appreciate you raising the question, and we would be more than happy to explore that with Kenothi Bruce, as well as our civil engineering, and of course, if I was there and I had access, because the parking lot is proposed to be right on this lot that's adjacent to the Pick and Save parking. So, it's a question that we could certainly, raise with Natalie and Dan. I don't know if there's another route that they could actually go through the Pick and Save to get to the main road and get to the stoplight, which is actually what I did when I was driving by that area the other day. I just made sure I was, at the stoplight, and how to get there. I'm not quite certain of at this point, but we're certainly.
And I realize we are not the plan commission.
Yeah, but no, that's a great idea.
From too many of these, but it's just, I'm supportive of this project and I think it's terrific. The traffic on Century Road and ability to get cars, especially left turning cars out of there, could become problematic, and people may start just making a right turn and figuring it out a different way. But
we'll just insist that everybody that lives there has to take a right turn then, because
they
need to
go around
go
the
west,
block.
not east. No, I think it's an excellent point. We'll look into that. We'll definitely look into that.
Well, thank you.
And Abby, we, as part of the approval process, and we didn't really talk about this at the planning commission, but I'm guessing there will need to be some kind of traffic impact analysis done. Lori, you probably know that too, just given that you've got a couple of driveways that are relatively close to one another. And if there are any other, reasonable solutions to your point, Darren, about that, but good comments.
Yeah, for any rezoning, the city requires the traffic study.
We'll have to hire the same firm on that Allen Boulevard one, because that was quite an in-depth traffic study that was done for Captain Bill's site. So we'll just hire them and just expand it to Century.
Other questions or comments from the committee? Obviously, we're not necessarily asking for approval on the project per se, other than generally support, but it's really about the disaster relief funding, for MDC's project, and that we support that. I believe they were the only applicant for those funds, so that should make this decision relatively easy, I would think.
Yeah, and I guess just in case you didn't read the email that I sent out with the packet, we did receive word on Friday that we received the grant. The main changes that we had made to the application was to modify it to a minimum of 30 units of affordable housing, and that we would use $50,000 of the grant to hire a firm to administer the grant. And we will start working on that in January because we have to get 3 competitive quotes in order to follow the CDBG guidelines. And we have already identified 3 firms that we think could do the work for us. But that's a next step beginning in January. So what we have on the agenda tonight is a recommendation, and it's our staff's recommendation that we select the MDC project. They were the only applicant, but we also are really supportive of the project. We think it's a great location for some affordable housing, to have some more infill development in an area that doesn't really have very much income restricted and affordable housing. And also, as Lori mentioned earlier, we are targeting Century Avenue for transit-oriented development, and actually Madison Metro is now looking at Century as a more likely candidate for bus rapid transit improvements over the next few years. So we think that it aligns really well with that goal also.
So Abby, we're really only looking to take action on item number 3, correct?
That's correct. And this is also, item number 3 is also on the Common Council agenda tomorrow evening, because in order to enter into a contract to accept the award of funds and then separately enter into a contract with the selected developer for the grant, there are several steps that we would still need to take, and we have 45 days from the date of the award letter, which was Friday. So we're hoping to get authorization from Workforce Housing and the Common Council to select MDC for the award, so that we can then put in place the next steps to get the other, I think it's 12 items that we need to get to the DOA in order to accept the grant.
So any other questions or comments for the developer or for Abby on this?
Could I just ask a question, Mike? I know I'm
Yeah,
not on
Lori.
the committee, but does it require scoring? Do we need to get scoring? The only reason I asked that is because that was an issue last time. And Abby, thank you so much for, applying for this and making this an opportunity, but I just want to make sure that that's not a problem again this time.
Abby, I guess I would think that would not be necessary here, given that we've only got 1 applicant. Clearly the last time we had 2 applicants, and, more reason to potentially score. But I guess I'd look for you to chime in on that as well.
Yeah, I would agree that since we only have 1 application, I wouldn't think that we would need to score these. We don't have any other parties that are gonna raise concerns with the DOA, but I'll defer to the committee. If you want to score the application, we can.
Yeah, I guess thoughts on that from others. I would think not, but certainly willing to consider other viewpoints as well.
Yeah, it seemed like the only reason that we were asked to score before is because there was not enough criteria given, or there was not obvious criteria given in an objective manner, I guess, and that's what they objected to. So I would agree with Abby that there's no need for scoring this time.
Any other views on that? To the contrary? Otherwise, well, I guess I would assume that we're in agreement on that. So I guess unless there are any further questions, I mean, I think we're looking for a motion to approve the recommendation of, allocating these CDBG funds, disaster relief funds, to Madison Development Corp. And forward that on to council for final approval tomorrow.
Sure, I'd move that the committee approve the recommendation to select Madison Development Corporation for the award of the Community Development Block Grant.
Thank you, Betsy. Have a second on that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ben. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Congratulations, Lori and Abby. We look forward to seeing your project play out. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, I mean, I hope everyone has a great holiday. Everybody can enjoy a little time off, and I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Hey, this is Sam. I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Sam. Second.
This is Darren, I'll second.
All right, thank you, Darren. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Have a great holiday.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
See you next
Yes.
year.